President Joe Biden will be addressing a joint session of Congress tonight, which is the first joint session that he will be addressing. And he's planning on outlining the details of his American Families Plan. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that right now. What does that plan include? What would it do to improve the lives of Americans? And more importantly, what's the likelihood of something like this passing? Well, the American Families Plan is expected to cost between $1.5 and $1.8 trillion and will include universal pre-kindergarten, sounds good. A federal paid leave program, sounds real good. Efforts to make childcare more affordable, super important. Free community college, which is long overdue. And of course, he is going to provide permanent tax credits meant to fight poverty. So these are the tax credits that would apply to families, the so-called child tax credit that is set to expire a year from the passage of the coronavirus relief plan. So I'm gonna be honest, everything that I've read in the preliminary reporting on this seems fantastic, but of course we need to be realistic about the roadblocks ahead in regard to the Senate and how it's structured, and more importantly, how Republicans are gonna fight pretty aggressively to prevent the passage of incredibly important legislation like this. So let's talk about some of the specific provisions that are likely to be proposed tonight. So the federal government would cover about 75% of the average community college tuition cost in each state when the program is fully implemented, with states picking up the rest. If all states, territories, and tribes participate, about 5.5 million students would pay absolutely nothing in tuition and fees, and that's according to the White House and its own analysis of this. So this is incredibly important, ensuring that at the very least, community colleges are free. Now, obviously, there's room for improvement there. Public colleges and universities should also be free. I should also note that Joe Biden has failed to cancel $1 of student loan debt, even after he had committed to canceling, in the very least, $10,000 worth of student loan debt for each federal borrower. He has not done that. But it does appear, based on the preliminary reporting on this proposal, he is focused on at least making community colleges free. It also provides an increase to the Pell Grant. This is a federal grant to college students to make college a little more affordable. When it comes to family leave, which I would argue is probably the most important part of this, the American Families Plan would provide workers with a total of 12 weeks. 12 weeks of guaranteed paid parental, family, and personal illness/safe leave by the 10th year of the program, which sounds like it's very far away, because it is. But the plan would also ensure 3 days of bereavement leave annually, starting in the first year of the plan's rollout. So I would like to understand why it would take 10 years for this provision to be fully implemented. To take 10 years to implement this is incredibly, it's an incredibly long time, and think about how much changes within 10 years. What could happen with a different administration coming in and essentially stripping this legislation of all of the provisions that we like. I mean, that kind of stuff does terrify me a little bit. And it would be easier to do that because if it's not fully implemented yet, well, people aren't enjoying these benefits, and it's a lot easier to get rid of the benefits before people even realize how productive they would be for their own personal lives. So I'm a little concerned about that. Also, workers would receive up to $4,000 a month through the National Leave Program, with a minimum of 2/3 of their wages replaced. The White House estimates the program will cost $225 billion over 10 years. Also, when it comes to the child tax credits, as I had mentioned, the initial idea was to get 1 year of child tax credits passed through the coronavirus relief package, and then Democrats would find a way to make it permanent moving forward. The proposal would extend or make permanent enhancements to several key tax credits that were contained in the Democrats' $1.9 trillion rescue bill, which Biden signed into law last month. The proposal contains about $1 trillion in investments and $800 billion in enhanced tax credits. So let's pause for a second and just pay close attention to the wording there. Because if you notice, there's already a little bit of a cave, because they're not just talking about, no, we want this to be permanent. The Biden White House is open to simply extending the child tax credit. What does that mean? Will it be extended for 1 year? And considering how difficult corporate Democrats have been in the Senate and how it's very unlikely a single Republican will vote in favor of this legislation despite how popular it is, it's unlikely that they will make the child tax credit permanent. And so when we have these discussions or this analysis in corporate media that intentionally compares Biden to Roosevelt, we need to push back against that, because Roosevelt did things that structurally changed the economy. He provided permanent programs like Social Security, for instance, like Medicare. Those programs are still used today and are incredibly popular today. These were structural changes to our economy, and they were permanent structural changes to our economy. If Biden doesn't make the child tax credit permanent, please stop comparing him to FDR. It's a ridiculous comparison. Now, on the upside, you have a president, a Democratic president, who's finally willing to spend more money on the American people as income inequality continues to be a problem, as the wealth gap is ever widening. And that's a positive development with the Democratic Party and with Biden's administration. But to compare him to FDR before he has secured a single permanent restructuring of the economy, I think it goes overboard, to say the least. The proposal also comes in addition to Biden's infrastructure proposal. So understand that this is a separate piece of legislation. And he plans on using much of his political capital in getting the infrastructure plan passed. I don't know how feasible it is to get that passed and immediately move on to the American Families Plan and genuinely think that you have a chance in passing that. In order to do it, you need to fight. And what I've noticed from the Democratic Party is they are far too willing to cave to the demands of clowns like Senator Joe Manchin, as opposed to listening to their own constituents. And when you talk to constituents, when you do polling, you find that the infrastructure plan is incredibly popular, even among Republican voters. I have no doubt that this will be a popular proposal with the voters specifically, because it provides actual economic help that is long overdue. Ronald Reagan came in and completely gutted childcare in America, which is why so many Americans are struggling to pay for childcare for their children so they can get to work and get what they need to get done. Right? And so this is good news. It's good that there's a focus on these issues, but proposing the right policies is half of the equation. The other half has to do with fighting for it and doing what's necessary to apply pressure to people like Kyrsten Sinema, like Joe Manchin. It would require actual rallying and campaigning in Arizona and in West Virginia. And what we've seen from the fight for a $15 an hour minimum wage is that the Biden administration isn't really ready or willing for that fight. And so I want to give them credit, but it's really, really hard to do it unless I see a clear plan of attack, until I see a commitment to fight for this legislation. And if we don't get that fight, if they're unwilling to engage in that fight, it's just not going to pass. I want to read a few comments from our members on this. John says, I can see the community college enrollments increase as students take their first 2 years there. This in turn could affect four-year college enrollment. I am curious to see if four-year colleges lower their tuition to make their institutions a little more appealing, because now there's actually a pretty good reason to avoid going to those four-year institutions for 2 years. It would make far more financial sense to go to a free community college for 2 years and then transfer. That way you're saving on college tuition for 2 years straight.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.